You know I've despised you since the very first moment I encountered you." Brooke Harrison screamed these words across the magnificent reception hall. It was 9:30 in the evening. The air conditioning was pumping frigid air, far too cold, and the space was laced with the scent of fading flowers. There were 52 guests gazing at me, some with their jaws practically unhinged, others dropping their eyes to their dinner plates. I was seated at the main head table in my deep emerald gown. My hands were resting gently on the snowy white linen tablecloth. They were perfectly steady. Brooke was standing, tightly gripping her champagne flute. Her ivory dress was a size too snug. My son, Ethan, was positioned right next to her, absent-mindedly chewing on a large shrimp. He didn't bother to glance up from his dish. I simply cannot tolerate this any longer. This entire situation, Brooke declared, her voice raspy from excitement. "Ethan, inform your mother that after the nuptials she can no longer inhabit the residence. It makes me nauseous to observe her shuffling around in those threadbare sandals every single day." The guests began to mutter. Eleanor Vance, my dear neighbor of 35 years, looked at me with deep sympathy. Walter Finn, the gentleman who operated the local corner market, tightened his fists, yet nobody uttered a syllable. No one came to my defense. "Just observe her, simply sitting there in absolute quiet," Brooke persisted, jabbing her finger at me like a statue. "That's what she's like daily in the house, wandering the hallways like a phantom, slamming pots and pans around at 5 in the morning. Ethan finally raised his head. His face was crimson. He took a large swallow of red wine and dabbed his mouth with a crisp napkin. "Brooke, please," he said, in a hushed tone. "Not here." "Why not here?" Brooke laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. "Everyone is already aware. Everyone understands your mother is a burden on us, a 60-year-old woman who lacks the ability to do anything besides prepare casseroles and watch her afternoon soap operas." I felt a surge of heat traveling up my neck, my cheeks blazing, but I remained silent. I didn't budge. I simply smiled, a tiny, practically invisible smirk, because they were completely oblivious to what I knew. They had no clue what I had been meticulously orchestrating for the past 3 months. "Besides," Brooke said, taking a step closer to me, "following the ceremony, we're going to require the entire dwelling for ourselves, for our upcoming children. Your mother can relocate to a care facility. There are plenty of adequate ones in the metropolitan area." Ethan gave a small nod. My own son agreed, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world, as if I were a piece of unwanted, obsolete furniture that was no longer serviceable. "Valerie," Brooke said, addressing me directly now, "I trust you comprehend that circumstances are going to shift. You've fulfilled your role as a mother. Now it's time for you to step aside and allow us to live our own lives." The silence was oppressive, thick. I could hear my own breathing. I could detect the ticking of the large wall clock. Everyone was waiting for my reaction. They anticipated me to weep, to scream, to rise and flee like a vanquished woman. But I was not a vanquished woman. Not after all I had uncovered. Not after all the weeks I had spent preparing for this precise instant. "Brooke is correct," I stated finally. My voice emerged calm and unclouded. "It is time for things to change." Everyone looked at me, stunned. Brooke gave a smug grin, believing she had finally broken me. Ethan sighed in relief, convinced this would be simpler than he had imagined. But then I performed something no one foresaw. I lifted my right hand and gave a subtle cue to the master of ceremonies standing by the sound system. He saw me. He had been patient. He knew exactly what to execute. We had practiced this numerous times. "Ladies and gentlemen," the MC announced, taking the microphone, The mother of the groom has prepared a very special surprise for the future spouses, a gift they will never forget. Brooke looked at me, bewildered. Her malicious smirk slowly disappeared. Ethan stopped chewing, his mouth gaping. Everyone turned toward the enormous projection screen hanging on the main partition of the room. The lights dimmed. The low chatter of the guests ceased entirely. I continued to smile because after 60 years of life, after 42 years of matrimony, after 37 years of being a mother, my moment had finally arrived. The screen flickered to life, and then slowly, the video that would alter everything forever began to play. The video that would reveal to everyone who my son Ethan truly was, who Brooke Harrison truly was. The video that would set me free once and for all. In the gloom of the hall, as the screen animated, I thought of only one thing. They had no concept I had organized it all. That for months I had been collecting evidence. That for months I had been anticipating this exact occasion. My retribution was just commencing. It all began 5 years ago when my husband Theodore passed away from a severe coronary event. Ethan was 32 years old then. He was residing in his downtown apartment, employed at his godfather's hardware establishment, and he would visit me every Sunday, following religious service. He would bring donuts and freshly ground coffee. We would sit in the kitchen and discuss his work, his aspirations, the young women he was seeing. "Mom," he would say, grasping my hand, "don't you worry about a thing. I'm always going to look after you. Dad requested me to before he died, and I gave him my solemn promise." Those assurances were a solace. They made me feel that I was not isolated in the world, that my only son cherished me as I had adored him for all those years. But everything changed when Ethan lost his position. The hardware store failed, and he could not secure anything else. He had outstanding bank obligations. He had to relinquish his apartment. One night, he appeared at my dwelling with 2 suitcases and eyes red from weeping. "It's only for a couple of months, Mom," he said, "until I regain my footing." I said yes. Of course, I said yes. He was my son, my sole remaining family. The house was spacious, filled with memories of his father. I assumed it would be pleasant to have the companionship. The initial few months were tranquil. Ethan sought employment during the day. At night, we would watch television together. I prepared his favorite dishes. He assisted me with the heavy groceries. It seemed like everything would be satisfactory. But Ethan failed to find a job. 6 months elapsed. Then a full year. He started consuming beer in the afternoons. He would stay up late watching video clips on his phone. He ceased assisting me with household chores. He stopped searching for work with the same intensity. "This locality offers no opportunities," he would complain. "All the positions are for young people who are proficient with a computer." I attempted to inspire him. I assured him things would improve, that he had to be patient. But internally, I was starting to worry. My son was transforming. He was becoming cynical, resentful. And then Brooke Harrison materialized. He met her at a birthday celebration at his cousin Hannah's house. Brooke was 25 years old. She worked as a legal assistant at a law firm and came from a wealthy background. Her father owned 3 clothing boutiques downtown. Ethan returned home that night talking about her as if he had encountered a deity. "Mom, she's the most stunning woman I've ever laid eyes on. She's intelligent, sophisticated, elegant, and she actually paid attention to me. I can't quite believe it." Initially, I was happy for him. I thought a girlfriend would do him good, that it would motivate him to obtain a job, that it would pull him out of the despondency he was sinking into. But when Brooke visited for the very first time, I recognized immediately there was something I did not appreciate. She arrived in an expensive frock and high heels. She scrutinized my home as if it were a filthy place. She sat on the edge of the sofa as if she were apprehensive about soiling it. "Valerie," she said to me with a contrived smile, "Ethan has told me so much about you. You have such a lovely home." But her eyes conveyed something different. Her eyes scanned the ancient curtains, the worn timber furniture, the discolored photographs on the walls. Her eyes were judging me. During dinner, Brooke spoke incessantly about her job, her friends, the high-priced eateries she favored. Ethan observed her, captivated, hanging on every utterance that came from her crimson-painted lips. "My family possesses a villa at the coast," Brooke said. "We should go for a weekend, Ethan. You will adore it." After that initial visit, Ethan began to change even more. He started criticizing my cooking. "Brooke says I consume too much sodium, that it's not healthy." He started complaining about how I dressed. "Mom, why don't you acquire some more contemporary garments? Brooke knows some absolutely wonderful stores." Slowly, my son drifted away from me. We no longer watched television together. We no longer conversed in the kitchen. He went out every evening with Brooke and returned late. On weekends, he would go to the Harrison coastal residence, and when he returned, he invariably had something to complain about, that the house was too outdated, that I did not know how to prepare modern cuisine, that my neighborhood friends were unrefined people. "Brooke says, you should learn how to operate a computer," he informed me once. "Women your age cannot afford to fall behind." "Brooke says this house needs a total renovation," he said another time. "It will never be worth anything looking like this." It was always, "Brooke says this, Brooke says that," as if that girl's views were more significant than mine, as if she knew my own house, my own life better than I did. But the worst occurred when Ethan announced they were getting married. It was a Tuesday evening. I was washing utensils after dinner. He came in with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "Mom, I have some important news," he said. "Brooke accepted my proposal." I forced myself to smile, to offer congratulations, to hug him. But inside I felt a cold lump in my stomach, a premonition, a fear I could not articulate. "When are you getting married?" I inquired of him. "In 6 months. Brooke desires a lavish ceremony. Her parents are going to finance everything." That night, after Ethan went to bed, I lay awake contemplating, thinking about how my son had changed, thinking about the way Brooke regarded me, thinking about the future. And for the first time in my life, I was afraid of being alone. Not alone because my husband was gone, but alone because my own son was becoming a stranger. Someone who no longer perceived me as his mother. Someone who saw me the way Brooke saw me, as an impediment, as something old and redundant. That was the night I began to realize that my son was no longer my son. He had transformed into someone else, a person I did not know, a person who frightened me. The first time I discovered the truth was on a Thursday afternoon. Ethan had departed with Brooke to look at bridal gowns. I was cleaning his room because he never did it anymore. Under his bed, I unearthed a folder full of documents. Initially, I imagined they were papers from the job he had secured at the gas station. But when I saw my name inscribed on one of the sheets, my curiosity overcame me. I opened the folder, and my world shattered. They were banking records, paperwork for a loan Ethan had acquired using my residence as collateral. My house, the house my husband and I purchased with the effort of 40 years of work. The house where Ethan was born and raised. He had falsified my signature. He had submitted documents stating that I had agreed to put the house up as security for a $25,000 loan, money he had utilized to buy a new vehicle and to pay for the honeymoon Brooke desired in Barbados. My hands shook as I read. My heart pounded so vigorously, I thought I was going to suffer a coronary event like my husband. Ethan had deceived me. He had perpetrated fraud. He had jeopardized the sole place I had in the world. But the absolute worst was still forthcoming. I found other papers, duplicates of documents showing that Ethan had been investigating elderly care facilities. He had a list with prices, sites, services. He had highlighted the least expensive ones with a yellow marker. On a separate sheet in his own handwriting, he had jotted down, "Mom, Whispering Pines residence, $3,500 a month, near the medical center in case of emergencies." I sat on his bed, the papers in my hands. I could not breathe. I could not think. My own son was planning to place me in a home. My own son had determined my future without consulting me about anything. But there was still more dreadful news to come. At the bottom of the folder there was a yellow envelope. Inside I uncovered a handwritten note from Brooke, a letter addressed to Ethan that said, "My darling, I already spoke with my parents and they consent. Following the ceremony, your mom cannot continue living with us. It's impossible to establish a new family with an old woman in the house. I already checked, and Whispering Pines is quite pleasant. They have round-the-clock nurses and activities to keep her occupied. We can liquidate some of your mom's old furnishings to cover the first 3 months. Do not feel remorseful. It is for the best for everyone." I read that letter 5 times. Every word was a dagger in my chest. Brooke did not just disdain me. She had persuaded Ethan that I was a problem to be resolved, an obstruction to be cleared from their root. I replaced everything exactly as I had found it. I closed the folder. I slipped it back under the bed. I walked out of the room on trembling legs and sat in the kitchen to drink a glass of water. For the following 2 hours, all I could do was weep, cry for the son that no longer existed, cry for the family I had forfeited without even recognizing it, cry for the future that others had decided for me. When Ethan returned home that night, I had already wiped away my tears. I had reached a conclusion. I was not going to confront him. I was not going to yell at him. I was not going to break down in front of him. I was going to do something far more strategic. I was going to observe. I was going to listen. I was going to amass information. Because if my own son was capable of betraying me like this, I needed to ascertain just how extensive his deceit extended. "How did it go with the dresses?" I inquired as he poured himself a glass of water. "Good, Mom. Brooke found a truly magnificent one. A little costly, but her parents are going to contribute." He lied so effortlessly. He smiled while he deceived me as if I were a simpleton who did not notice anything. "I'm delighted for you both," I said. "You deserve the absolute best." That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I commenced my own inquiry. I examined all the papers I had on my desk. I searched for documents for the house, my husband's life insurance policy, my bank records. I uncovered that Ethan had been going through my possessions for months. Some papers were in different positions. Others had marks from being photocopied. I also discovered something that chilled me to the core, an application on his phone that he had left unlocked on the kitchen table, a voice recording program. There were files dated over the last 3 months, recordings of our discussions. I put on headphones and listened to one. It was a conversation we'd had the previous week about my savings. I had mentioned to him I had a small amount of money set aside for emergencies. In the recording, you could hear my voice perfectly, stating the exact total. Ethan had been spying on me. He had been compiling information about my money, my assets, my private conversations. That dawn, sitting in the darkness of my kitchen, I understood that the situation was much more severe than I had assumed. They did not merely desire to get rid of me. They were planning to pillage me. They were documenting everything to justify that I was a senile old woman who could not manage her own affairs. For the first time in 60 years of life, I felt genuine terror, fear of my own son, fear of ending up homeless, fear of dying alone and forsaken in a care home while they resided in my house with my money. But along with the terror came something I had never experienced before: wrath. A cold, calculating, intelligent wrath. A wrath that did not prompt me to scream or weep. A wrath that compelled me to plan. If Ethan and Brooke intended to play dishonestly, I was going to instruct them on how to truly play dishonestly. If they thought they could manipulate a foolish old woman, they were about to find out they had selected the wrong person. That dawn, while they slept peacefully, believing they had everything under control, I began to orchestrate my counterattack. They did not know that in 42 years of marriage, I had mastered the art of being highly observant. They did not know that I had raised a son, and therefore understood every form of manipulation. They did not know that the quiet, compliant woman they saw every day was just a facade, a mask I had worn to maintain harmony in my family. But the harmony was finished, and the mask was about to come off. The next day, my real work would commence, the work of salvaging my life and my self-respect, the work of demonstrating to them they had chosen the wrong target, the work of preparing the complete and absolute destruction of their schemes. The next day, I woke up at 5 in the morning as usual, but this time was different. I was not the same woman who had retired the night before. During those few hours of slumber, something had transformed inside me. The victim had perished. A strategist had emerged. I made coffee and sat in the kitchen with a brand new notebook I had purchased the previous week to record recipes. Now, I was going to employ it for something entirely different, to plan the downfall of my son and his fiancée. On the initial page, I wrote, Ethan Thompson and Brooke Harrison Retribution Blueprint. Below, I created a list of everything I had uncovered: the deceitful loan, the care home plans, the covert recordings, Brooke's letter. It was all documented. I had evidence, but I required more. When Ethan came down for breakfast, I had my first performance ready. Son, I said, serving him scrambled eggs, I was reflecting yesterday on what you mentioned about the wedding. I believe you are right. This house is too old for a young couple. Ethan looked up, surprised. Truly, Mom? Yes, I lied with a smile. Brooke deserves to begin her marriage in a beautiful place. You two need your own space. Ethan's eyes lit up. He thought he had triumphed, that he had finally persuaded me to leave voluntarily. So, what are you going to do? Where will you reside? Well, I said, pretending as if I were considering it carefully. I've been examining some possibilities. There are some very nice places for people my age with recreational activities, nurses, other ladies to converse with. It was a falsehood, of course, but I needed Ethan to believe his plan was succeeding. I needed him to lower his guard. I'm so pleased you're thinking that way, Mom. Brooke is going to be ecstatic. After breakfast, Ethan left for work, whistling. He imagined he had won the lottery, that I would depart without a struggle, and he would obtain everything. As soon as he was gone, I picked up the phone and dialed Arthur Davies, the lawyer who had been my husband's confidant for 3 decades. Arthur was 74 and retired, but he still assisted old friends with legal matters. Arthur, I said, I need to see you immediately. It's a very grave issue. Of course, Valerie. Do you want me to come to your home? No, better at your office. And Arthur, this must remain between us. No one can know I came to see you. An hour later, I was seated across from Arthur in his modest downtown office. I recounted everything to him. I presented him with the copies I had made of the fraudulent loan documents. I showed him Brooke's letter. I explained about the recordings. Arthur listened in silence, shaking his head gloomily. When I finished speaking, he removed his glasses and wiped his eyes. "Valerie," he said, "this is extremely serious. Ethan committed forgery and banking fraud. He could face jail time. I don't want to send him to prison, Arthur. He's my son. But I also don't want to end up in a nursing home while they live in my house with my money." "What do you intend to do then?" "I want to safeguard myself. I want to ensure they cannot do anything to me. And I want them to learn a lesson they will never forget." Arthur smiled. It was the first time I had seen him smile since I arrived. "I always knew you were sharper than you let on. Your husband always told me." "Art," he would say, "my Valerie seems quiet, but she possesses the most brilliant mind I've ever known." For the subsequent 2 hours, Arthur and I devised a flawless strategy. First, he would legally investigate the deceptive loan. Second, he would assist me in revising my will without Ethan finding out. Third, we would document everything Ethan and Brooke were doing. "You need more concrete proof," Arthur told me. "You need to record them discussing their plans. You need evidence that they are conspiring against you." He explained how the small recorders they sold at electronics stores operated, how I could conceal one in my clothing or in my handbag, how I could instigate conversations to prompt them to say incriminating things. "Are you certain you want to proceed with this, Valerie? Once we commence, there's no turning back." "I am certain," I said. "I spent 42 years being an obedient wife, 37 years being a devoted mother. It's time for me to be a woman who defends herself." I left Arthur's office with a recorder the size of a dime hidden in my handbag. I also had a detailed plan for the next 4 months. 4 months to accumulate all the proof I required. 4 months to prepare the perfect ambush. That afternoon, I went to the electronics outlet and bought a larger recorder to secrete in my room. I also acquired a small camera that resembled a decorative piece for the living room. The salesman, a very courteous young man, demonstrated how everything functioned. "It's to monitor the house when I go on trips," I lied. "You know how things are with security these days." When I reached home, Ethan had already returned from work. He was in the living room on the phone with Brooke. He had not observed I was home. "Yes, my love," he was saying. "I already talked with her this morning. She's on board. She says she's going to look for a residence on her own." I stood eavesdropping from the kitchen. "No, it won't be an issue." I think she was even relieved. You know how older people are. They feel like a liability. I activated the recorder in my handbag. "The cash, don't worry. As soon as she's gone, we'll sell some of the furnishings and we'll have funds for the initial few months. Then we'll look into cashing out my dad's life insurance policy that's in her name." Every word was a puncture. But now every puncture was being documented. Every deception was being recorded. "I love you, Brooke. Soon we'll be alone, and everything will be flawless." When he ended the call, I walked into the living room with a smile. "Was that Brooke?" "Yeah, Mom. I told her you decided to look for a place to live. She's genuinely happy." "I'm so glad," I lied. "Do you have a date for the ceremony yet?" "We're thinking March. Brooke wants it to be in the spring." "How lovely. I'll begin looking at residences tomorrow. I want to have everything sorted out by then." Ethan embraced me. "You're the best mom in the world. Brooke was right. She says, 'You're so clever for making this choice.'" As he held me, I reflected about everything I had documented, about everything I was going to record in the coming months, about the surprise I had in store for them. That night, after dinner, I retreated to my room early. I placed the larger recorder beneath my bed and programmed it to capture all night. I desired to hear if Ethan and Brooke spoke when they thought I was sleeping. The next day, when I reviewed the recording, I discovered they had chatted. At 11 at night, Brooke had come over. They had been in Ethan's room for 2 hours planning my future. "Did you ascertain how much the house is valued at?" Brooke asked. "My Uncle Charles says at least $550,000. It's in a very desirable district." "Perfect. With that, we can finance the extravagant wedding I want and still have sufficient funds left over to remodel everything." "And what if my mom changes her mind?" "She won't. Old women like her always end up doing what they're told. Besides, she already signed the loan papers. Even if she wanted to, she can't withdraw now. Listening to them plot my destruction with such coldness, with such calculation, I felt the last remnants of maternal affection vanish from my heart. They were not merely greedy, they were vicious. They were planning to leave me with nothing while they enjoyed the rewards of my entire life's labor. But what they did not know was that I was also planning, and my plan was going to be significantly better than theirs. Over the following few days, I continued my perfect charade. Every morning, I pretended to look for care facilities in the daily paper. Every afternoon, I informed them about the calls I had placed. Every night, I monitored their secret discussions and captured everything. The quiet woman had awakened, and she was prepared for combat. For the next 3 months, I became the greatest actress in the world. Every day I perfected my role as the resigned old woman who had accepted her destiny. Meanwhile, I collected evidence like a professional investigator. The recordings accumulated. Ethan and Brooke conversed every night about their intentions, about how they were going to renovate my house, about the furniture they were going to sell, about the money they were going to get for my husband's life insurance. After the ceremony, "We're replacing all the locks," Brooke said, "so your mom can't return even if she changes her mind." "What if she comes for her belongings?" "We give her an hour to pack the necessities. The rest we sell or discard. It's not like she'll need anything in the care home anyway." Arthur helped me modify my will without Ethan knowing. Now all my money and holdings would be bequeathed to a children's shelter. Ethan would not inherit a single cent. "Are you sure, Valerie?" Arthur inquired of me. "He's your only son." "My son ceased to exist a long time ago," I replied. "This man residing in my house is a stranger who wants to rob me." We also looked into the fraudulent loan. Arthur retained a private investigator who verified that Ethan had falsified my signature. We had sufficient proof to send him to prison for 5 years, but I did not desire legal justice. I wanted poetic justice. The concept for the video came one night in November. Ethan and Brooke were watching a wedding program on television. They were discussing the ceremony they wished for. "My dream is to have a wedding that no one will ever forget," Brooke said. "One that people talk about for years." In that instant, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to give Brooke the wedding she would never forget, but not for the reasons she expected. The next day, I called Arthur and outlined my plan. "I want you to hire someone who can edit the recordings into a video, I told him. "I want them to take all the conversations where they talk about putting me in a home, selling the house, taking my money." "For what purpose?" "To show it to everyone at their engagement party." Arthur was silent for a moment. Then he chortled. "Valerie, you are wicked. I love it." We arranged everything with military precision. The video editor was a young man Arthur worked with on divorce cases. He understood how to combine audio with visuals to produce impactful presentations. "Mrs. Thompson," he said when I explained what I wanted, "this is going to be a nuclear detonation." The video was impeccable. It was 13 minutes long. It began with photos of Ethan as a child with me and his father. Soft music played in the background. It appeared like a typical homage, but then the recordings would begin. Ethan's voice saying I was a liability. Brooke's voice explaining how they were going to dispose of me, the plans for the care facility, the discussions about selling my furniture, all documented, all with dates and times, all in their own voices. The video concluded with a statement that appeared in large characters. So you know who Ethan Thompson and Brooke Harrison truly are. Meanwhile, I kept pretending to search for care facilities. Once a week, I would depart the house with my handbag and return with leaflets from various places. Ethan and Brooke believed I was making arrangements to leave. Have you decided which residence you favor most? Ethan would inquire. I'm deciding between two possibilities, I would lie. One is closer to downtown, but the other has superior recreational activities. Take your time, Mom. We want you to be comfortable. What a hypocrite. What a deceiver. But I just kept smiling and acting as if I believed him. In December, Brooke announced they had elected to have a large engagement dinner prior to the wedding. They were going to invite all the family, friends, and neighbors. They wanted it to be a memorable event. It's going to be in the ballroom at the country club, Ethan told me. Brooke wants it to be very refined. How delightful, I replied. Can I assist with anything? Don't worry, Mom. Brooke's parents are hiring everyone. You just have to show up, look lovely, and enjoy yourself. Perfect. I could not have wished for a better opportunity. A week before the dinner, I contacted the MC they had engaged. He was an elderly man who had known my family for years. Mr. Jenkins, I said, I need to ask you a very special favor. I explained that I wished to do a surprise for Ethan and Brooke, that I had a tribute video I wanted to screen during the dinner. Of course, Mrs. Thompson. What time would you like me to play it? When I give you the signal, I said. It's a surprise, so it has to be at the exact right moment. Mr. Jenkins consented without any questions. He assumed I was just a sweet mother preparing something nice for her son. The final few days before the dinner were the most challenging. Ethan and Brooke were thrilled. They spoke constantly about the party, about the guests, about how perfect the night was going to be. In the end, everything worked out, Ethan said to me the night before. You found a place where you'll be happy. We're going to start our life together. Everybody wins. Yes, I replied. We are all going to get exactly what we deserve. That night, I could not sleep, not from anxiety, but from anticipation. After months of dishonor, falsehoods, and betrayal, the moment of my retribution had finally arrived. I arose early and prepared with care. I selected my deep emerald gown. I had my hair styled at the salon. I put on the pearl earrings my husband had given me for our 20th anniversary. I desired to look flawless for my moment of victory. When we arrived at the hall, everything was adorned with white flowers and gold lights. The guests began to stream in. My neighbors, Ethan's friends, Brooke's family, all dressed elegantly, all anticipating a night of celebration. But I knew it was going to be a night they would never forget. A night where the truth would finally come to light. A night where Valerie Thompson would cease being a victim and become justice itself. The reception hall was full by 8 in the evening. 52 people in their finest attire, champagne flutes in hand, jovial conversations filling the air. The main head table was embellished with white roses and gold candles. Everything looked like it was ripped from the pages of a wedding magazine. I was seated in my place of honor next to Ethan and Brooke. I wore my deep emerald gown, my pearl earrings, and a smile I had perfected over months, the smile of a proud mother commemorating her son's engagement. But inside, I felt something I had never felt before, a chilly composure, an absolute certainty the serenity of someone who knows they possess all the winning cards. Brooke was luminous in her figure-hugging white dress. She moved through the hall like a monarch, accepting congratulations, posing for photos, relishing every moment of attention. Ethan followed her with a smitten gaze, like a young man. "Valerie," said Eleanor Vance, approaching my table, "you look so radiant tonight, and everything is so exquisite." "Thank you, Eleanor. Brooke has very excellent taste for organizing gatherings." "As noted, have they confirmed a date for the nuptials in March?" I replied with the same smile. "And by then I'll be residing in my new dwelling." Eleanor looked at me, perplexed. "Your new dwelling?" "Yes. I've chosen to move to a place more suited for my age. Young people require their space." I did not tell her that place was supposedly a care home. I did not tell her I had not selected anything willingly. I just smiled and changed the subject. At 8:30, dinner commenced. A garden salad, chicken breast in a wine sauce, wild rice. The food was delicious. The conversations flowed. Everyone seemed to be enjoying a wonderful time. Brooke rose to express gratitude to the guests. She spoke of how happy she was, how much she adored Ethan, how eager she was to commence her new life. "And I want to especially thank my future mother-in-law," she said, looking at me, "for being so understanding and supporting us in all of our decisions." The guests applauded. Some looked at me with affection. They thought Brooke was honoring me. They did not know she was ridiculing me. Then Ethan spoke. He thanked Brooke's parents for financing the party. He talked about their plans for the future, about the house they were going to refurbish, about the children they hoped to have. "My mother always taught us that family is the most paramount thing," he said, "and now our family is going to expand." As he spoke, I discreetly checked my handbag. The small remote control was there. Mr. Jenkins, the MC, glanced at me from time to time, awaiting my signal. Not yet. First, I wanted them to continue talking. I wanted them to continue deceiving in front of everyone. I wanted them to dig their own grave. At 9 Krug, it was time for tributes. Brooke's parents said kind words about love and marriage. Ethan's friends shared amusing anecdotes from college. Everyone toasted to the couple's felicity. Then Brooke decided to do something unrehearsed. She stood up again and requested quiet. "There's something else I want to say tonight," she announced. Her voice sounded different, louder, more self-assured. "Something everyone should be aware of regarding our domestic situation." Ethan looked at her, taken aback. He did not know what she was going to reveal. "Our wedding is going to represent many transformations," Brooke continued, "necessary transformations, so that we can start our life on the right foot." I felt my heart accelerate. Was she going to say what I believed she was going to say? "For instance," Brooke went on with a smile that did not reach her eyes, "my future mother-in-law has decided to relocate to a more suitable place for her age, a place where she will have the company and specialized care she needs." The muttering commenced. Some guests looked confused, others uneasy. "It's a very courageous decision," Brooke said, "because not all women her age have the bravery to acknowledge that they can no longer live independently." There it was, the public dishonor I had been expecting. Brooke could not restrain herself. She had to make me look poorly in front of everyone. She had to prove that she had prevailed. "I truly admire Valerie," Brooke persisted in her speech, "for recognizing her limitations and making the correct choice." The silence in the hall was awkward. People did not know whether to applaud or remain silent. Ethan's face was scarlet, and he was attempting to signal Brooke to stop, but she was on a roll. She had started and could not halt. At first, I thought it would be challenging to convince her, she said, snickering. But it turned out to be simpler than I envisioned. In the end, older people understand when they are no longer useful. Those words were like a vicious strike to the face. Several guests exchanged shocked looks. Eleanor looked furious. Walter was clenching his fists. "Brooke," Ethan muttered, "please." "What?" Brooke said. "I'm merely stating the truth. Your mom has served her purpose. She raised her son. She was a wife. Now it's her turn to step aside so the new generations can flourish." The malice in her voice was impossible to disguise. She was no longer pretending to be sweet. She was no longer acting like the ideal fiancée. She was exhibiting her genuine character in front of everyone. And that was precisely the moment I had been waiting for. I stood up slowly. Everyone looked at me. Brooke fell silent, awaiting my reaction, waiting for me to cry, to break down, to flee, humiliated. But instead, I smiled. A broad, authentic, satisfying smile. "Brooke," I said, my voice clear and powerful, "you're right about one thing. Tonight is going to be unforgettable." I retrieved the small remote from my handbag. I looked toward Mr. Jenkins and nodded. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Jenkins announced, taking the microphone, "the mother of the groom has prepared a very special surprise, a tribute video for the future spouses." The lights went out. The giant screen illuminated. Brooke looked at me, confused. Ethan frowned. And then my retribution began. The screen displayed photos of Ethan as a child. Soft music played in the background. Everything seemed normal, a typical homage from a proud mother. But I knew what was coming next, and I could not wait to see their expressions when they realized what they had truly done. My moment had arrived. The soft music filled the hall as photos of a young Ethan appeared on the screen. The guests smiled tenderly, seeing images of my son playing in the park, extinguishing birthday candles, receiving his high school diploma. It all seemed like a standard tribute from a loving mother. Brooke relaxed in her chair. Ethan smiled, relieved, thinking it was just a sentimental video. The guests whispered fond comments about what a charming child my son had been. But then the music shifted. It became more dramatic. The family photos vanished, replaced by images of records, bank papers, contracts, falsified signatures. "What is this?" Ethan muttered. On the screen, text materialized in large characters. "The real plans of Ethan Thompson and Brooke Harrison." The hall plunged into absolute silence. Brooke turned pale. Ethan attempted to stand up, but I placed my hand on his arm. "Sit down, son," I said in a serene voice. "This is only the beginning." The first recording commenced playing. Ethan's voice echoed clearly throughout the hall. "My mom's getting elderly. She's not thinking clearly anymore. We have to convince her to go to a home before she understands what we're doing." The guests looked at each other in shock. Eleanor clapped a hand to her mouth. Walter shook his head in disappointment. "That's not genuine," Brooke shouted. "It's a fabrication." But then the second recording started. Brooke's voice. "Elderly women like her always end up complying with what they're told. Besides, she already signed the loan documents. Even if she wanted to, she can't back out now." The silence was chilling. 52 people gazed at the screen, mouths open, listening to how my son and his fiancée had conspired to defraud and abandon me. "Turn that thing off," Ethan yelled, trying to stand again. "Let it finish," I said. "After all, you always desired an unforgettable wedding." The third recording was crushing. Brooke speaking coldly about selling my furniture. "Give her an hour to pack the necessities. The rest we liquidate or throw away. It's not like she'll need anything in the care home anyway." Several guests began to rise from their seats. Some looked outraged. Others simply wished to depart, but no one could divert their gaze from the screen. "This is against the law," Brooke screamed. "You cannot record private conversations." "Private conversations," I retorted without losing my composure. "In my own house, planning to rob me in my own living room?" The video persisted. More recordings played. Ethan talking about how he falsified my signature for the bank loan. Brooke calculating how much money they would gain from selling the house. The two of them laughing about how easy it had been to deceive me. "Following the ceremony, we're changing all the locks," Brooke's voice was heard saying on the recording, "so your mom can't return even if she changes her mind." Brooke's father stood up from his table, his face red with mortification. "Brooke, what is the meaning of this?" "Dad, don't believe her. That old woman is mentally unstable." But it was too late. The video displayed authentic records, copies of the forged papers, proof of everything they had planned. There was no way to refute it. The most startling recording came at the conclusion. Ethan and Brooke discussing my husband's life insurance policy. "As soon as she's in the home, we'll look into cashing out my dad's life insurance policy that's in her name. That money should belong to us." "Enough!" Ethan screamed, smashing his fist on the table. "Enough!" But I was not going to stop. Not after months of dishonor. Not after they plotted to pilfer everything I had worked for over 42 years. "There's still more," I said calmly. On the screen, photos of the care home leaflets Ethan had been examining surfaced. Documents where he had computed the expenses. Notes in his own handwriting about how they were going to get rid of me. The text on the screen read his note aloud. "Mom, Whispering Pines residence, $3,500 a month. Near the medical center in case of emergencies. E." The murmurs in the hall escalated into outbursts of indignation. Several people started shouting at Ethan and Brooke. Others simply got up and left without a word. "You are contemptible," Eleanor cried out. "How dare you treat your mother that way? You ought to be incarcerated," Walter added. Brooke desperately attempted to justify herself. "You're misinterpreting everything. We just wanted what was best for her." "What was best for me?" I finally stood up. My voice rang out clear and strong throughout the hall. "Stealing my house was what was best for me. Falsifying my signature was what was best for me. Plotting to put me in a home against my will was what was best for me." Ethan had moisture in his eyes, but they were not tears of regret. They were tears of fury at being exposed. "Mom, please," he mumbled. "We can discuss this in private." "No," I shouted. "No more private conversations. No more lies for months. You treated me like I was a simple old woman who didn't notice anything." The video reached its conclusion. The final words appeared on the screen in huge letters. "This is the true story of Ethan Thompson and Brooke Harrison, so that everyone knows who they truly are." The silence that followed was absolute. No one knew what to say. No one knew where to look. Brooke shattered the silence with a hysterical shriek. "This is all the revenge of a bitter old woman who can't accept that her son doesn't need her anymore." Those words were her ultimate mistake, because they verified everything the guests had just heard on the recordings. They confirmed it was all true. "Brooke," I said, looking her directly in the eye, "you're right about one thing. I am an elderly woman, but I am not foolish, and I am definitely not a victim." I walked toward the microphone that Mr. Jenkins had left on a nearby table. It was time for my closing statement. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "I apologize that you had to witness this, but it was essential for everyone to know the truth. For months, I pretended to be the simple mother who allowed herself to be manipulated. But in reality, I was gathering evidence, documenting everything, preparing for this instant. Because nobody, and I reiterate, Nobody has the right to decide my future without consulting me. Nobody has the right to pilfer from me, and nobody has the right to treat me like I am refuse. My retribution was complete, but the final blow was yet to land. The hall was in total silence. The few remaining guests looked at me with a combination of shock and admiration. Ethan had his head in his hands. Brooke was sobbing with fury, her streaked makeup staining her white dress. But I was not finished. The video had only been the opening act. The true climax was about to strike. "Arthur," I said, looking toward a table in the back, "could you please join me?" Arthur Davies stood up slowly. He had been observing everything from his seat, waiting for my signal. In his hands, he held a black leather folder containing the most important records of my life. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, taking the microphone again, "I would like to introduce Arthur Davies, my attorney, and the attorney for my late husband for 30 years. Ethan jerked his head up. "An attorney? What do you need an attorney for, Mom?" "To protect myself from criminals," I replied, never taking my eyes off him. "Arthur, please explain to everyone what we've discovered." Arthur cleared his throat and opened the folder. "After investigating the documents Mrs. Thompson provided, we have confirmed that Ethan Thompson committed felony fraud by falsifying his mother's signature to obtain a bank loan using this house as collateral." Murmurs filled the hall. Ethan turned ashen. "The loan amount is for $25,000, Arthur continued, money that Ethan utilized to purchase an automobile and for personal expenses, including the initial payment for a honeymoon trip to Barbados." "That's untrue," Ethan yelled. "Mom granted me permission." "Permission?" Arthur smiled coldly. "Do you possess any document proving that permission? Any paper signed by your mother authorizing the loan?" Ethan fell silent. He had nothing because he had never asked for my permission. "Furthermore," Arthur went on, "we have evidence that Ethan was planning to have his mother institutionalized against her will and to seize her assets. This constitutes attempted property fraud and elder abuse." Brooke finally found her voice. "You cannot prove any of that." "Can't we?" Arthur pulled a small device from his pocket. "All the conversations you heard in the video were recorded in this house over the past 3 months. We have over 20 hours of recordings where you specifically plan how to rob and abandon Mrs. Thompson." The silence was deafening. Every word from Arthur landed like a heavy hammer. "But that's not all," I continued. "Arthur, show them the new will." Arthur produced an official document with seals and signatures. "Mrs. Thompson amended her will 2 months ago. Ethan Thompson is no longer the beneficiary to anything whatsoever." Ethan shot up as if he had been hit. "You cannot do that. I'm your only son." "You were my only son," I replied. "Now you are just a criminal residing illegally in my house." "Where is everything going to go then?" Brooke asked, her voice breaking. "My entire estate," I said with satisfaction. "My savings, my house, my life insurance policies, everything will be donated to the Children's Hope Shelter, to children who genuinely require assistance, not to avaricious adults who want to pilfer from their own mother." Ethan staggered. He grasped the back of a chair to prevent himself from collapsing. "Mom, please, can we remedy this? Can we talk?" I laughed bitterly. "How do we talk after you falsified my signature? How do we talk after you planned to have me institutionalized? How do we talk after you computed how much money you would earn from my demise?" Arthur held up another document. "We also have an eviction notice. Ethan Thompson has 24 hours to vacate his mother's property." "That's against the law," Brooke screamed. "You cannot just expel him like that." "Illegal?" Arthur looked at her with scorn. "Like falsifying documents? Like plotting to rob an elderly woman? like conspiring to commit fraud? I walked over to Ethan and looked him directly in the eyes. My son, the baby I had cradled in my arms, the boy I had nurtured with so much love, the man who had betrayed all of it for currency. Ethan, I said in a composed voice, for 37 years I gave you everything, my devotion, my time, my energy, my money. I sacrificed my own life to give you the best life possible. Tears streamed down his cheeks, but it was too late for tears. And you repaid me by plotting to pilfer everything from me and abandon me in a home as if I were refuse, as if the years I dedicated to raising you were worthless. Mom, No, I interrupted. You no longer have the right to call me Mom. Mothers are for children who respect them. You are just a thief who happens to have emerged from my womb. I turned to Brooke, who was still crying in her chair. And you, Brooke Harrison, you who told me I repulsed you from the very first day, you who planned to dispose of me like a piece of obsolete furniture. Valerie, Now it is you who repulses me, I said. Not for your appearance or the way you dress. You repulse me for your decayed soul, for your heart full of malice. Arthur replaced the documents in his folder. Mrs. Thompson, would you like us to pursue criminal charges? Everyone held their breath. Ethan and Brooke looked at me in terror. They knew I had sufficient proof to send them to prison for several years. I considered my answer. I pondered justice. I reflected on retribution. I thought about 42 years of blissful marriage. I contemplated 37 years of devoted motherhood. No, I said finally. I'm not going to send them to prison. Ethan sighed in relief, but I continued. If you ever approach me again, if you try to contact me, if you even drive down my street, Arthur will file all the charges immediately. I approached the microphone one last time. Ladies and gentlemen, I am sorry you had to witness this, but sometimes it is essential to reveal the truth, no matter how painful it is. The few remaining guests began to applaud timidly at first, then with greater intensity. Eleanor stood up and shouted, "Well done, Valerie. Those miserable individuals deserved it." Others joined in the applause. For the first time in months, I felt respected, valued, powerful. Ethan and Brooke collected their things in silence and exited the hall without bidding farewell to anyone. Their parents followed, embarrassed and mortified. The hall emptied gradually. The guests left, discussing what they had observed. Some gave me supportive hugs before they departed. When I was finally alone with Arthur, I sat down in a chair and took a deep breath. "How do you feel?" he asked me. "Free," I answered. "For the first time in years, I feel completely liberated." But I knew the genuine freedom would arrive later. When I reached home and Ethan was no longer there, when I could walk through my own house without fear, when I could commence my new life, my real life. 3 days later, my house was vacant. Ethan had come for his possessions with 2 friends and a removal truck. He did not utter a word to me. He did not look me in the eye. He packed his belongings in silence and departed forever. Brooke did not come. I presume she did not have the courage to face me after what had transpired at the hall. I strolled through the empty rooms feeling something I had not experienced in years. Peace. Genuine silence. Not the tense silence of someone tiptoeing through their own home, but the golden silence of someone who is finally in charge of her own fate. Ethan's room no longer smelled of beer and dirty socks. The living room no longer had his video games strewn everywhere. The kitchen no longer had his dirty dishes waiting for me to clean them like a maid. For the first time in 5 years, my house was truly mine. That first night, I slept better than I had in a long time. I did not have to listen for covert discussions. I did not have to pretend I was asleep while they plotted my future. I did not have to act like the simple old woman who comprehended nothing. The next day, my real new life began. Arthur assisted me in annulling the fraudulent loan. The bank, upon reviewing all the evidence, decided not to prosecute Ethan legally, but they immediately canceled the debt and placed an alert on his credit file that would make it difficult for him to secure loans for many years to come. "It's a form of justice," Arthur told me. "He won't go to jail, but he won't be able to commit fraud so easily anymore." I also replaced all the locks on the house. I wanted to be certain that Ethan could not enter, even if he had copies of the keys. The initial few days were unusual. After 5 years of having people in the house, being alone felt strange, but not alone in a negative way. Alone in the sense of liberty. Alone in the sense of being able to do whatever I wished whenever I desired. I could watch my soap operas without anyone ridiculing me. I could prepare my casseroles without anyone critiquing them. I could walk around in sandals in my own house without anyone telling me I was a ludicrous old woman. The story circulated through the neighborhood in a matter of days. People discussed what had occurred at the engagement dinner. Some congratulated me when they saw me on the street. Others looked at me with a mix of pity and awe. Eleanor came to visit me every afternoon. "Valerie," she would say, "I never thought you were capable of something like that. I always viewed you as so quiet, so submissive." "I didn't know I was capable either," I would reply. "Sometimes you don't know your own strength until you have no other choice." A week later, I received a call I did not anticipate. It was Brooke's mother. "Valerie," she said, in an ashamed voice, "I wanted to apologize for what my daughter did. We were unaware of their schemes." "I know," I replied. "You are not to blame for what your children did. Brooke is devastated. She says you ruined her life." I was silent for a moment. Then I answered, "I didn't ruin anyone's life. I just revealed the truth. They ruined their own lives with their decisions." "Is there any way to mend this? Any way you can forgive the children?" "Ma'am," I said firmly, "forgiveness is for those who are truly remorseful. Your children weren't sorry they harmed me. They were sorry they got caught. That is a very significant distinction." She did not call again. 2 weeks later, Arthur brought me news about Ethan and Brooke. They had separated. Brooke's family had canceled the wedding. Ethan had relocated to another city. "Does it make you unhappy?" Arthur asked. "No," I answered honestly. "I'm saddened to have forfeited the son I believed I had, but that son never truly existed. The man who lived in my house was a stranger." A month later, I made a decision that surprised even myself. I chose to travel. I had resided my entire life in the same town. I had gotten married there, raised my son there, been widowed there. I had never been away for more than 2 days at a time. But now I had funds, I had time, and I had the freedom to do whatever I desired. I bought a train ticket to San Francisco. It was the first time in my life I had traveled alone, the first time I had made a decision just for me without consulting anyone. The trip was magnificent. I witnessed landscapes I had never seen. I met new people on the train. I stayed in a small but clean hotel. I walked through parks I had only observed on television. During those 5 days, I realized something crucial. I was not merely Ethan's mother. I was not merely Theodore's widow. I was not merely the victim of a family betrayal. I was Valerie Thompson, a 60-year-old woman with a whole life ahead of her, with stories to tell, with places to see, with experiences to live. When I returned from the trip, I started making alterations to my house. I painted the walls brighter colors. I bought new plants. I replaced some furniture with pieces I liked better. I also started going out more. I joined a group of ladies who convened every Wednesday to play cards. I started attending church on Sundays, not out of obligation, but because I enjoyed the company. I even bought new clothes, dresses that made me feel attractive, comfortable yet sophisticated shoes, earrings that sparkled when I moved. 6 months after the engagement dinner, I was seated in my refurbished garden sipping coffee when a certified letter arrived. It was from a lawyer in the adjacent town. Inside was a note from Ethan, a letter asking for forgiveness, stating he understood his error, pleading with me to pardon him and grant him another chance. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it and placed it in a drawer. I did not reply. Not because I was cruel, not because I could not forgive, but because I understood something fundamental. Forgiveness does not signify reverting to being a victim. Forgiveness does not mean allowing someone to hurt you again. I could forgive Ethan in my heart. I could wish him happiness in his new life, but that did not mean I had to allow him back into mine. Some decisions are permanent, and distancing yourself from someone who betrays you is one of those decisions. That night, seated in my renovated living room, I reflected on everything that had transpired, on the woman I had been and the woman I had become. I had lost a son, but I had gained something more valuable, my self-respect. I had lost a family, but I had reclaimed something more important, my freedom. I had lost the illusion of being loved unconditionally, but I had discovered something more potent, the ability to cherish myself. I stood up and looked at myself in the living room mirror. I saw a 60-year-old woman with silver hair, fine lines around her eyes, and something new in her gaze. Strength, resolve, tranquility. My story is my own now, I said aloud to my reflection. It's just beginning. And for the first time in decades, those words did not scare me. They gave me hope, because at 60 years old, I had learned the most important lesson of my life. It is never too late to defend your dignity. It is never too late to start anew. And it is never, ever too late to choose to be free.